Michelle. Obviously, you know what this stuff was all about, right? It's not a surprise that we showed up tonight.
Almost overnight, she went from a possible witness to a person of interest in the case of a missing mom of 5 from New Canaan.
We see state police, New Canaan police, searching downtown Hartford.
So what's that about? Why is the scene moved to Hartford?
You need to tell us what you know about Jennifer's murder and Forrest Dulles.
The girlfriend in the middle of a bitter and brutal divorce battle.
The stuff you were throwing out, we have. And it's all Jennifer. It belongs to Jennifer. Do you understand?
Turned high-profile murder investigation.
Guys, what happened to Jennifer, Michelle? You're gonna do the right thing, Michelle?
We're taking you inside the trial of Michelle Troconis.
And thanks for joining us once again for Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. I'm Shannon Miller. A live look right now outside of Stamford Superior Court once again as we get ready for a new week of testimony. Now let's get you up to speed on the very latest. First, a shocking moment to start court proceedings on Friday. A member of the jury passed a note to a court marshal saying one of the jurors had made comments that the case was like the movie Gone Girl. The judge questioned the juror named in the note who said they made the comments and dismissed them from the case. We'll dig deeper into what happened there in just a moment. We also heard more from a member of the state forensics lab who performed the DNA testing in the Jennifer Dulles case. We'll break down some of her testimony and what it means in this case coming up with expert analysis from a former state forensics lab scientist and now forensic DNA consultant Eric Carita. Now, we also heard from a lieutenant colonel from Connecticut State Police who performed a blood stain pattern analysis of Jennifer Dulles' garage and the Chevy Suburban. Blood-like stains show there were at least 2 impact points in Jennifer's garage. More of that analysis also coming up. And near the end of the day on Friday, we finally heard about Albany Avenue in Hartford, the video that has been described as a turning point in this investigation. And it's how Michelle Troconis is first brought into the fold. State Police Sergeant Kenneth Ventresca testified about the search for the surveillance cameras at homes and businesses in Hartford after Forrest Dulles' phone pinged in the area the night Jennifer was reported missing. Now, Ventresca spoke about what they were looking for in that footage.
We were looking for any specific vehicles, and we're looking for Jen Dulles.
Kevin Geis joins us now once again from Stamford Superior Court. Kevin, Sergeant Ventresca is expected to be back on the stand today. I spoke with him several times throughout this investigation, throughout the years. This case, finding Jennifer, was his entire focus for several years, and it sounds like he's going to get jurors more insight now into how that infamous video along Albany Avenue came to be.
Absolutely. That's exactly where we are expected to pick up today. Now, we know that Forrest Dulles surrendered his phone to police investigators, and that was ultimately what led investigators to the Hartford area. Sergeant Ventresca testified that Forrest's cell phone pinged in the Hartford area on the night of May 24th. Detectives, of course, were puzzled as to why Forrest would be there, and finding Jennifer was still the top priority.
First and foremost, there's a missing person, and we're 48 hours into this. We haven't located her, so there's an exigency component on that. Secondly, Albany Avenue, Hartford area, it's a rather high crime area, the city of Hartford. But regardless, regarding those handset locations, we are going to go canvass the area. We're going to look for any videos or any witnesses in the area and see what his business is there in that area. We don't know of any real estate properties he's already owned. We know that 80 Mountain Spring was a house for sale. We know that he lived on 4 Jefferson Crossing. So we didn't know what business he had doing in Hartford.
Sergeant Ventresca told the jury they canvassed the area looking for surveillance cameras and pointed out one at a Jamaican restaurant. He spoke about why they may be looking for in the footage, which included any vehicles connected to Forrest Dulles. Now, that's just about where things left off. Sergeant Ventresca said he did not view the video itself, only screenshots. So we are expecting to hear from an officer who watched the video itself coming up very soon. Shannon.
Now, Kevin, as you mentioned, Sergeant Ventresca also listed all the vehicles that they might be looking for connected to Forrest Dulles, the Ford Raptor being of particular interest in the Albany Avenue portion of this investigation. Why was that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're starting to hear about the Ford Raptor now. And of course, once we get to that video that we have obtained back from when investigators were still doing their work, we know that the Ford Raptor was seen in the video dumping trash bags inside trash cans along Albany Avenue. And that's also the first time we see Michelle Troconis involved in this case. At one point, she leans out of the Ford Raptor, reaching toward the sidewalk. And of course, investigators at the time asking her a ton of questions in her interviews around that Ford Raptor. Shannon.
This video here eventually obtained from the C4 cameras in downtown Hartford. It took those surveillance videos of Albany Avenue to see that Ford Raptor driving along that area, and that's eventually when investigators tapped into the help of the C4 cameras to zero in on any vehicle that matched that description there. Kevin, let's talk now about that bombshell moment right at the start of the day on Friday. Just as testimony was set to begin, Judge Kevin Randolph told the courtroom a marshal was passed a note with an allegation of juror misconduct.
It reads, one of the jurors discussed something about the case, and it was all over social media. Said it was like Gone Girl. A brief mention. Several other jurors said, don't discuss this.
Now, jurors, as you know, not supposed to talk about the case at all or look at social media during the trial. So the judge decided to question both the juror who wrote the note and the juror named in that note, that person later admitting to making that Gone Girl comment.
The reference to Gone Girl, if any other juror was familiar with the film, may have influenced that juror to start to hear the evidence in terms of their familiarity with the film. The court then dismissed juror number 186 and thereafter proceeded to question each juror individually, specifically whether each one of those jurors had heard the comments. Some did, some did not. Whether, if they had heard the comments, they were able to still afford the state and the defense a fair and impartial trial.
Now, each juror then brought in and questioned individually in a closed courtroom and told the judge that they could stay impartial moving forward, even though they had heard that comment. Gone Girl is a book-turned-movie where the wife disappears and frames her husband for her murder. The Gone Girl theory was first brought up by Fotis Dulos' attorney Norm Pattis, who told reporters then that Jennifer's disappearance could have been a revenge suicide hypothesis. In a written statement from June 2019, Pattis saying in part, "We don't know what happened to Jennifer, but the Gone Girl hypothesis is very much on our mind." Jennifer's family vehemently denied that claim. So, Kevin, this was a controversial narrative when Norm Pattis first shared that. It caused some strong emotion, understandably, from Jennifer's family because they knew she would never willingly leave her 5 children. Can you talk about, Kevin, the impact of that comment in the courtroom for the jury, for those who have been following the case, and, of course, for the family?
Absolutely. Anyone who's been following the case for a long time, back all the way to 2019, probably is familiar with that statement that was shared with NBC Connecticut at the time. So, of course, that specific movie has a lot of sort of weight behind it whenever it's tossed out. So even inside the courtroom on Friday, when the judge read that note out loud, you could sort of feel a visceral reaction inside the courtroom from members inside. Everyone sitting there, everyone sort of tensed up a little bit because of the weight that movie specifically has when it comes to, comments that were previously made at the time. You could see sort of everyone not panic, but have sort of this tense reaction. It was definitely something that the judge had to clear up quickly and ultimately, make a decision about that juror as well as the juror that overheard the comments as well.
Jennifer's family and friends probably thinking to themselves, not again, this Gone Girl theory. You were there, Kevin, throughout the jury selection process. It was difficult, of course, with the high-profile nature of the case, and the trial delayed several more days, so more alternate jurors may need to be picked in this. 6 days into what's expected to be, again, a 6-week-long trial. We are already down to 2 jurors. Is there any sort of concern here?
Absolutely. I think, for prosecutors, they're definitely a little concerned. The last thing they want in this case is a mistrial. They're definitely thinking about, should they have grabbed that sixth alternate juror at the time? They ultimately decided to start the trial with only 5 alternates. Of course, now they're down to only a couple alternates. So, of course, they're definitely concerned. Prosecutors are definitely thinking about, and I'm sure jurors as well are even thinking about making sure that, they don't make any comments. They don't think about anything related to this trial when they're not supposed to. It's definitely sort of on everyone's mind as we continue along, only 7 days into the trial in total.
Yeah, and Kevin, the judge asked those remaining jurors, again, if they could remain impartial moving forward, and they said they could. But is this something the prosecution and defense are still concerned about? Here's what one of our legal analysts, defense attorney Trent Lima, had to say about that last week.
Do you think that it could remain maybe in the back of a juror's mind as they hear more testimony?
Absolutely. You're always concerned that a jury or jurors are not necessarily going to follow the rules of not making up their mind too early, of keeping an open mind throughout the case, and not considering any outside information. You're always worried about that, but I'm sure they are especially worried now that they know these jurors heard this comment. Even if it wasn't overly inflammatory, it's still starting to, just a week into trial, starting to show some jurors making their mind up.
And NBC Connecticut's Kevin Nathan asking Trent that question last week, later on in the day after that bombshell moment in the morning. So, Kevin, let's talk now about Judge Randolph. He is measured, he is experienced, he is very well respected, and he's had to deal with other jury issues, objections, motions, basically the gamut. He even asked questions in an effort to help the jury understand complicated testimony. What have you noticed inside the courtroom about how he handles problems like this and the effect that it's got and the mood in the courtroom?
Absolutely. Judge Randolph seems to have an incredibly steady hand, regardless of how many hurdles get thrown his way and the court's way. He makes a point every single time something comes up that anything, if he has to issue any sort of opinion or any sort of thought, he always refers to himself as the court at large. He is very clearly trying to follow everything to a T, making sure every T is crossed and every I is dotted. He continues to sort of make sure that the courtroom stays calm. He continues to ask questions, making sure that the jurors have clarity whenever a complicated topic comes up. He clearly, if he's going to walk through this entire trial, we're expecting, of course, him to continue to try to have as steady a hand as possible, especially if the juror count continues to trickle down.
All right,
Shannon.
helping keep things on track. Kevin, let's get now to some of the other evidence presented on Friday. The jury heard testimony from a blood stain pattern analysis expert. Lieutenant Colonel Mark Davison with the Connecticut State Police took the jury through the reconstruction work that he did in Jennifer Dulas's garage to determine where the blood stains originated from.
So based on those factors in the context of the scene, it indicates that there are mutually exclusive bloodshed events, one on each vehicle.
So does that mean there? I'm sorry. Was that? Let me ask you that. Does that mean that there were 2 impacts in that area?
A minimum of 2.
So, Kevin, here we're getting a better idea about what may have happened in that garage. Investigators, again, believe something terrible happened to Jennifer inside of her garage, of course, but with no body. There's no autopsy. Her cause of death has been ruled homicidal violence of undetermined type. But this testimony here, I felt really started to kind of paint the picture, at least, especially for the jurors, but to all of us, more of how she might have died.
Absolutely. I think for the jurors at large, they're sort of hearing this testimony. There were a lot of questions, originally about what happened inside that garage. Of course, through this entire trial, we've gotten a lot of evidence from inside the garage. There's been a ton of blood testing, testing for blood inside the garage as well as inside the home. So, of course, we're starting to see a little bit more slowly. The prosecutors are starting to piece together for the jury what may have happened inside that garage and what led to the presumed murder of Jennifer Dulas.
As you're watching this testimony, Kevin, I think we all start to kind of try to fill in the blanks here about what happened there inside that garage in that time frame. That same bloodstain pattern analysis was done on Jennifer's Chevy Suburban. Investigators were able to determine whether stains on the Suburban, which was found near Waveney Park in New Canaan, were connected to the stains found in Jennifer's garage.
Or did you form an opinion as to whether or not the Chevy Suburban was parked in the garage at the time of the, blood impact?
I mean, based on the spatter stains that were on the Chevy, it's known history the day before, the 25th, the 24th, and the blood stains on the floor. It is likely that the Suburban was parked on the left side of the garage facing forward at the time of the bloodshed event.
So again, learning more here from this analysis, Kevin, shows that a violent event happened in that garage while both of those vehicles were parked inside of there. How does this fit into that narrative, Kevin, that Jennifer did not drive that Suburban to Waveney Park?
Of course, once we heard that testimony from Lieutenant Colonel Davison, you started to learn that, something may have happened inside the garage with the Suburban there. So, of course, when you have blood stains and an analysis done on the side of the Suburban before that Suburban even moved, of course, that starts to, again, paint a picture for the jury about what may have happened and, leads them to believe that something may have happened to Jennifer before that Suburban ever left 69 Wells Lane in New Canaan.
It had to be a narrow space then where all that allegedly took place. Kevin Geist, live for us once again at Stamford Superior Court. We'll let you get back into the courtroom this morning. We appreciate your insight. Still much more to come on Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. Next, we are bringing in a forensic DNA consultant, Eric Carita, to talk with us about how significant this DNA analysis plays in the case. Welcome back to Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. I am joined today by one of our expert analysts on the case, Eric Carita, a forensic DNA consultant, former employee of the forensic lab. Eric, we so appreciate you being here. You're the owner of ACE Forensic Consulting Services, and again, you used to spend a lot of time in the lab that's been talked about so far in this case. I got to ask you, when it comes to DNA evidence in a case like this, those blood-like stains, the substances found throughout Jennifer's garage, the SUV and home, can you talk about the importance that forensics lab plays in a case like this, a high-profile case, a missing mom of 5? There's that real sense of immediacy once you find that blood-like matter to get an identification done, right?
Sure, absolutely. Anytime you have a case such as this, where you have a missing mother of 5, husband and current girlfriend is alleged to have been part of it, you're going to get the wheels turning, and you're going to get them turning quickly. Once evidence is collected at the scene and you kind of have an idea, it's coming up KM positive or presumptive for blood, that evidence goes to the lab. And an expedite, such as this, is not unusual. When you have cases where you have children, elderly, handicap, or very high profile such as this, things get pushing through rather quickly. And this isn't the first time in Connecticut we've had this.
Right.
I worked on Sandy Hook, and as the evidence came in, it was being processed. I worked on Annie Lay at the Connecticut lab, and that was the missing girl who was murdered inside Yale and stuffed in the wall for 5 days. As Western District Major Crime and the FBI got us the evidence, we were processing it super fast.
And the timing of it all, I mean, Jennifer went missing on a Friday, that blood-like substance found, and, a lot of this happened kind of on those weekend hours, it seems like. It was escalated so quickly. Let's talk now about, this was about a week later, that Fotis Doulos and Michelle Troconis, through those search and seizure warrants, give over their DNA, cheek swab, Pavel Gumeni, who is Fotis Doulos' employee, and the children's DNA, also tested in those same areas of concern. We know that Fotis' DNA had that positive results on the blood-like stain found on the kitchen faucet and the cabinet, as well as a fingerprint on that mudroom doorknob. We know Fotis was not allowed in the house based on that court testimony. There were some strict rules. Was there any other way that Fotis' DNA could have showed up inside the home?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, these are the things that the prosecution loves, this evidence, all right? The defense potentially likes the evidence as well, because we can't tell. There are certain limitations to DNA. We can't tell how DNA was deposited, when it was deposited, in what order it was deposited. And you really saw the prosecution bring it out and the defense try to bring out this notion of primary versus secondary transfer, okay? And this is key, I think, to this type of case, where, as you said, Photostoulos was not allowed to be in the home. So the presence of what was reported out as an inclusion of his DNA in the home, the prosecution's really going to focus on that, while the defense is saying this could be, as they described, primary transfer, directly deposited, or secondary transfer. So primary transfer would be, I'm handling my pen. I'm directly depositing my DNA onto that object. Secondary transfer.
Nice to meet you,
Shannon. Now I grab my coffee cup. Have you ever touched my coffee cup?
I've never touched your
You've
coffee
never touched
cup.
my coffee cup. Your DNA from your skin cells from this transfer that we had transfers through an intermediate, my hand, onto my coffee cup. You've never touched it, but your DNA could still be on there. And I think that's where a lot of the focus was with respect to the DNA when Kristen Maydell was up there. And the defense was kind of focusing on, well, okay, wait a second. There's a cake box, and I handle the cake box, and then I give you the cake box. As you take it, could your DNA get on my hands from that box? Yes, that's called secondary transfer, and that comes through an intermediate, the cake box itself. So this could be very, very, very good evidence for the prosecution, but also the defense has to take into account, well, all right, there are certain limitations to DNA that need to be expressed, or the jury needs to be informed of them.
And even you were watching along this testimony, we learned, again, that Photostoulos had been at a backyard dinner a couple nights before. He brought the food over. So again, there is that chance, according to your lab and the research that you do on these cases, that transfer could have happened. Other reasons for him not being inside the home.
Right. There are a number of ways in which transfer can happen. And the prosecution is going to say, well, this was primary transfer. Okay. He directly handled that faucet, while the defense, unless they're going to basically say, okay, yay, that's his DNA, or it matches, or whatever, but it's a who cares, because that doesn't tell you or the jury what they need to know for the trier effect, that was deposited by primary transfer as part of a crime, we'll say.
And what's so fascinating, we learned throughout all of this, and for the cases that I've set in on this, is just how much DNA we leave around on a daily basis. We're going to talk more about that coming up. More of Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis coming up. Again, the most in-depth DNA testimony and evidence that we have heard so far. Is the jury able to absorb all of this, or was it lost on them? We'll talk more with forensic DNA consultant Eric Carita after this. All right, you are watching Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. We are back now with Eric Carita, a forensic DNA consultant, to talk about this DNA testimony. There was a lot of terminology, Eric. This is the world that you live every single day, but for a jury, a lot to digest in this. What was your takeaway on how it was presented?
Well, anytime you're attempting to explain a very complex scientific aspect during testimony, it's an educational. You know, you are being a teacher. You're trying to bring the jury along with you. And sometimes it can be very complex, and sometimes it can be very difficult to explain what we call hardcore scientific verbiage or terminology. The goal is not to lose the jury. It was difficult just based upon the fact that there was so much evidence.
The depth of it all.
And you're talking about complex computer programs called star mix, evaluating and interpreting some of this evidence. We're talking about likelihood ratios, you know, complex statistics, to the point where the judge even said, okay, wait a second, we got to get a hold of some of this terminology and can get an idea of included, excluded, inconclusive. What do these mean? So the jury can then use that information during deliberation and get a better understanding of this evidence. We're there as educators. We're simply the conduit between the evidence and the jury.
And more to come, likely, from Kristen Maydell. We know that a big part of this has to do with those trash bags.
I would have to say absolutely,
Avenue.
yeah, this is not the last time you're going to see Maydell. There's the trash bags that were found. Yep.
Eric, thank you so much. Your insight is great on this. Again, helping
Absolutely.
breaking it down for us. That wraps up our exclusive Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis streaming special. You can watch the trial live on our streaming channels when court starts around 10 a.m. We'll have live coverage on NBC Connecticut starting on the news at 4. And be sure to join us weekdays at 9 a.m. for more in-depth analysis of the trial as it continues to unfold. Thanks for watching once again.